Hey everyone, how's it going? Zach here, back with a video for all of you today. I bet you this is a video you've all been waiting for, and it's only expected as it's been requested over and over again in the comment section. Simply because, even though I cover a lot of politics and social commentary, I've also talked about my experience with white women, why Asian women go for white guys, and why it is I, date particular women and all of that. So this was actually a video request from somebody who wanted to know my perspective on Asian men dating black women, simply because there's a very small variety of videos that are out there on the internet. And the videos that are out there aren't necessarily bad, but the fact that these Asian women who date these black women who date these Asian men tend to be overseas in countries like Japan or Korea or China, where obviously there is a larger market, there's a bigger saturation of Asian men to choose from. But here in the United States, the whole Asian man, black woman dynamic is pretty rare. And in fact, in my opinion, personally, I have yet to see it, except in my own family, which is where it gets interesting. So, some of the questions that she wrote me were questions around like, have I ever dated, been attracted to black women? What does my family think about it? What do my friends think about it? Would I ever consider marrying one? My perspective on the lack of seeing, Asian man, black women couples, and are there any specific reasons as to why we don't see this type of coupling? And there's just some other stuff that I want to talk about in this video. So, the magic question that everybody wants to know, have I ever dated black women? I have gone on dates with black women. I have never dated black women long term, and it's never gotten to a point where they have met my family simply because there was no serious relationship that came out of those dates. Now, the reason for that isn't for anything, racially related, but just because it was bad timing, and there were just other things in life that were going on where we weren't able to also formulate a relationship out of the interaction. So, but speaking of attraction, I'm attracted to all races of women regardless of race. I think that I've made that pretty clear. So whether it's black women, white women, or Asian women, I have made this comment before in a lot of videos. I don't really care what race the girl is, as long as she's attractive and we get along. And I think that most men, when it comes down to it, it has more to do with attractiveness, like physical attraction, than it has to do with race. And that's just not me speaking it, but this is something that's been echoed, not just, in a lot of men's communities, but just more than often than not that's the case. A lot of times people want to point the big finger at racism or prejudice being the big reason as to why people are attractive or not attractive. But if you grew up, in a environment where you were just exposed to all different races of people, for me, it's never been a problem. And yes, I have been attracted to black women. That answers that question. But I've only really gone on dates with maybe 2 or 3 ever in my entire life. And it's not to say that I wouldn't date black women or go after black women. It's just that I don't know enough attractive black women. I really don't. I haven't met many. I have a lot of friends who are black women, but it's like, they're not in positions where it would actually manifest into a further relationship. So, but speaking of my family, believe it or not, I actually have this is also in her email where she asked about, what does my family think about black women or dating women who are not Asian or, just like other races of women. Personally, the only person in my family that I actually care about who has an opinion on this dating preference matter is my father, and he personally doesn't care. My father has made it very, very clear that he doesn't care who I date or who I marry, just as long as we're shared in our values. And obviously, a lot of the things that we care of as being important to take into a relationship. Race has very little contingency of it, and I can say this, as a American family who's been in this country for over 100 years. There's 4 generations of my family in the state alone that have been here. There's bound to be interracial marriages, and they're very evident in my family. So I do have a black uncle, actually, not biologically by blood, but who married a cousin of mine. So there are, my family does have, a multitude of different races in our family: white, black, Latin, you name it, they're all in my family. So as a whole, my family doesn't really have a problem with it, simply because it's something that we've been exposed to. We're a very multiracial family. I personally am full Chinese, but I have a lot of mixed cousins and a lot of, adopted cousins, a lot of just different people from different races. So hope that answers that question. Another thing that I do want to get into that, you know, aside from I think I've pretty much, you know, given my 2 cents on dating black women. I personally would. I don't have a problem with it. It's just that I haven't had many interactions or relationships with black women. But one thing that I want to say is that the black women that I have dated, I've dated simply because they were like seeking out Asian men. And I don't know if anybody else out there who isn't black and has dated black women have had these experiences. For me, it was kind of like, and I just want to be honest here, they were like into Asian men. They were like into like Asian culture, kind of like weebos, even though I don't like using that word very often. And that's, you know, what generally is the case whenever I do see Asian men with black women, for the most part. But that being said, I just don't think that, you know, the whole typical Asian man being with black women doesn't exist for reasons other than otherwise. It's just that I believe the reason why we don't see that very often has to do with a couple of things. Number one, it may just be an incompatibility of personalities and values, which, you know, when it comes down to it, unfortunately, we're just not exposed to as many black people in our relative proximity. Now, I don't say that to be offensive. I'm just saying that that's true. When, you know, kids are growing up, even Asian men, just on their own, by default, still as a whole tend to default on their own race. They still actually tend to seek out Asian women and all that. It's just that oftentimes they're not given the opportunity because Asian women perhaps may go for other men. And also, there may also be a lack of masculinity that is expected, you know, from an Asian man for them to be compatible with a black woman. And that's not to say that black women want manly men. It's just that there is a little bit of a personality disconnect oftentimes that I've witnessed with Asian men, especially when it comes to connecting with other black women, in my experience. But that being said, you know, everything that I've said about like interactions and interracial, intergender dynamics between Asian men and black women, you know, has nothing to do with race. It really has nothing to do with that. Now, granted, there are people who are prejudiced, but when it comes down to it, it's a values thing. You know, it's like, do they value education? Do they value working hard? Perhaps do they, you know, value family and all of that kind of stuff? And I think that the main reasons as to why we don't see a lot of AMBW type couples here in America is simply because there's just a lot of cultural disconnects, right? And unfortunately, modern dating culture has really perpetuated certain groups of people as not being very desirable, which is probably also another reason why that is the case. Which leads me to my next point of this video that I want to talk about surrounding Issa Rae. She also mentioned this specifically. For those of you who aren't familiar, Issa Rae is a black comedian woman who apparently in one of her books, I'm not too familiar with her, but she wrote it in her email, was talking about how black women should go straight to Asian men and give up on black men. Simply because this is actually rooted in her stand-up routine. Actually, let me just take a look at it real quick. But Issa Rae is this black comedian that I actually did not know of. She's known as the awkward black girl, which, you know, weirdly enough is abbreviated to ABG. And she wrote about it in one of her books where she actually talks about, you know, how black women should basically go straight for Asian men simply because they tend to be low on the totem pole as far as dating preference go. She asked me what my opinion on that is. Honestly, I don't think that you should follow what Issa Rae thinks. I mean, this woman is a comedian. A lot of it is satirical. Personally, I think that when it comes down to it, people should just date whoever they want to, you know? I know that even just within the black community that there is a lot of issue whenever there's interracial dating or whenever black women decide to go for other men or black men go for like white women. That tends to, you know, create a little bit of heat within the community. But in my opinion, I don't have a say in this. I don't have a dog in this fight. It's just whoever, you know, I don't think that black women should just give up and go to Asian men and give up on black men. I think that that's ridiculous. I think that, you know, if this is solely something to do with race, that's the main problem. You know, the big thing about interracial dating, because I think that this is a piece that she's talking about, is the fact that because we are bothered by race is the reason why a lot of these relationships don't work. And this actually ties back to some of the questions that I was reflecting on and were asked in the beginning of this video, which is like, what would your family think? What would your friends think? I think that that's the point. I think that because we're fixated on what our family and what our friends think about interracial dating, whereas if I were to go out and date a black woman, or if black women were to go date Asian men, the topic of race is going to come up regardless, okay? By no means should you not acknowledge race, because it is something that's going to come up. It is something that you're probably going to be asked about and challenged on consistently, and not talking about it would not necessarily be beneficial for your relationship, but at the same time, ignoring it and you know, thinking, but what I'm trying to say is at the same time, you should also acknowledge the fact that you are not together because of race. You are together because you have shared values, or you find each other attractive or like each other. And unfortunately, I think that what interrupts the flow, not just in modern dating culture today, but with a lot of the satire, a lot of divisiveness that happens within the black and the Asian community as it pertains to interracial dating, has made it just more about race than it has to do with actually being genuinely attracted to the other person. And because of that is why there's probably not a lot of Asian men, black women dating, because let's just be honest here. It's like Asian men are not very desirable, and black women, unfortunately, suffer the blunt end of the stick when it comes to desirability as far as what modern dating is concerned. And I'm not saying that to insult anybody. And I think that that's the reason why Issa Rae was talking about how, okay, well, black women should just go after Asian men. I think that that is just not the best way to go about doing this. I think that when you introduce race as the sole reason for why anybody should get together, or why interracial babies are beautiful, or, you know, I have a fetish for a certain race of people, that already means that you're starting the foundation of a relationship off of something that's trivial and something that isn't important, you know? Because we're fixated on race is why it becomes a problem. Race is going to be something that you will be asked, you know, and challenged with in an interracial relationship, but getting together because of racial preferences should not be the reason as to why you get with somebody. So those are just my opinions on Asian men and black women dating. And of course, you know, I talked a little bit about my own experiences. I have yet, you know, to be in a long-term relationship with a black woman, and that has nothing to do with just, you know, because I'm not attracted to black women, or I'm, you know, I don't prefer them at all, but just because I don't know very many who are readily available and are willing to date. It's just that I haven't been out with enough. So that's all I have to really say for this video. I hope that answers your question to the subscriber who sent me this very nice email. I'll obviously, you know, not going to mention you specifically by name, but I do appreciate your email, and I hope that that answers some of your questions regarding interracial dating between Asian men and black women, just to kind of give my 2 cents on this. Thank you so much for watching my video today, you guys. I really hope you got something out of it. Be sure to leave a comment and a like on this video, and let me know what you think. All right, take care.